Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Until the last few years, Fran Hawthorne spent her career as a journalist and award-winning non-fiction author, specialising in healthcare, finance, and the nexus of business and social activism. She's been an editor and writer, both on staff and long-term freelance, at Fortune magazine, Business Week, the New York Times, and many more publications. Her 8 non-fiction books include Ethical Chic, The Inside Story of the Companies We Think We Love, which was named one of the best books of 2012 by Library Journal. But she's actually been writing fiction since she was 4 years old. Before her debut novel, The Heirs, was published in 2018, she was selected as a participant at the Bread Loaf Writers' Conference in Vermont. With the publication of I Meant to Tell You, she's now firmly committed to fiction. And she also writes reviews for the New York Journal of Books, and she's at work on her next novel at her computer in Brooklyn, New York. I so enjoyed my conversation with Fran. She is a woman who has such immense experience in all areas of writing, fiction, non-fiction, novels, articles, you name it. And it really comes across in our conversation that she has established this life for herself that enables her to be creative, enables her to write to her best. You know, she's had to be self-motivated. Being a freelancer, she has to be self-motivated. And that was a great training ground for her now that she's in fiction writing. And she applies that same self-accountability. But she also talks about how publishing her first novel really was a massive milestone for her. That was the accumulation of all that she had worked for these years. Right at the age of 4, that was what she wanted to do, and now later in life this is what she's achieved. What I really want you to take away from our conversation today is just how life-changing writing your first novel is. It's not about the money, it's not about having the big deal, the big publishing deal. It's about what it does to you, how it transforms you as an individual, how it makes you see that you can achieve anything that you want to achieve, and how once you do it, once you've achieved that, everything else changes as well. There is a ripple effect that you cannot help but feel, and I really hope you take that away from what Fran shares today. So enough from me, let's get listening. Yay, Fran, it's so great to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I wonder if you just start off by telling us a little bit about how you became a writer and got to where you are now.
Sure. I didn't become a writer because I always was. I'm not the only person to say, oh, I've been writing as long as I can remember. I've been writing forever. That's true in my case. It's true in many people's cases. I can't remember a time I wasn't scribbling and folding paper into books before I even knew the letters. But I think one thing that's a little different from me is from elementary school age, I was serious. This was going to be my career. I tried to get published in middle school. I sent a handwritten manuscript off because I didn't know how to, keyboard yet. Off to a publisher who replied, please contact us again when you're old enough to sign a contract. I was absolutely serious. And I look back on some of the novels I wrote elementary school. They weren't bad for elementary school. I wrote one about a family that was during the American Revolution, a family that was torn between British sympathizers and colonists, which I suppose your audience, if you're in Scotland, might side with the colonists. But anyway, but I mean, the point is, for 8 years old or whatever, that's pretty
serious subject matter. Yeah,
most Americans don't even know that families were divided in the American Revolution. So anyway, I was just serious, and so I don't know why it was.
So did you, so you'd always been writing, which is wonderful, but did you sort of then pursue that, once you left school, did you go to college and study, or did you go straight into publishing? How did it work for you?
Sure. Yes. So, right, as I was continuing this writing constantly, I assumed, somehow I knew that you didn't earn a living writing fiction. I don't know how I knew this, except that I did not know anyone who were, I didn't know any writers at all. They were teachers, doctors. I'm thinking of my family, or kids, my friends' parents, engineers. So I just figured I would be an English teacher. That's kind of what was my mother, was what girls did. And I didn't want to be a teacher, and I would have been a terrible teacher. I mean, in my mind, teachers are saints. They are amazing. They're miracle workers. So anyway, I went to college and majored in English again. Well, I was going to be an English teacher. And my sophomore year, one of my roommates said to me, "Well, Fran, if you like to write, why don't you join the school newspaper?" Oh, never. Newspapers, this is hack writing. I am an artist. But I walked in the door, and I have to do a shout out. This was the University of California at Berkeley, and the student newspaper was the Daily Californian. I walked in the door. They gave me an assignment. I enjoyed it. I did a good job. They put me on staff, and that was it. That changed my life. That is when I became a different kind of writer. So then I had a career that you could make a living out of. I got during college, I worked on the school newspaper, and I was what's called a stringer, which is in journalism, and I think in other careers too, you're kind of on call and you get paid by the assignment, but I was the stringer for the San Francisco Examiner. I was their regular person in Berkeley. Berkeley is just across the bay from San Francisco. It's very close. Anyway, so right out of college, I got a job at a chain of award-winning weeklies in Silicon Valley, which again is near Berkeley and San Francisco. And, it just kind of kept going. I wanted to be in New York, the center of the universe. I got a job in New Jersey, across the river from New York, and got an apartment in New York. And then, kind of like I got, then I moved up to more famous, national publications. And then I got my first nonfiction book contract, so I just kept going.
You make it sound like, you make it sound like you were absolutely living that dream. I mean, in my head, I've got sort of Sex and the City characters going to New York, in publishing, just living the life. And, you wrote for Fortune, Business Week, the New York Times, really big, prestigious, what's the word I'm looking for? Newspapers and magazines. But were you just kind of in the right place at the right time and these things happened to you, or did you have to actively pursue these roles?
Oh, you have to actively pursue. And believe me, well, in one way, I was living the dream. In another way, I was pushing aside the dream of fiction. But you're right. I mean, look, not every minute was great. I mean, there's the drudge work, believe me. But I did get to go. I mean, I got to, I go to interesting places, talk to fascinating people. I met President Clinton in the White House. I went on one assignment, a trip to Switzerland. I would just had fascinating, times. And, and really, part of the time I was covering for a financial magazine, I was covering government issues. So I was constantly going to Washington and interviewing, senators, Treasury Department officials, to me, I mean, I'm such a politics nerd. To me, that's like a movie stars, So
that must have been wonderful fodder for the fiction that one day you would come to write. All these amazing characters and the double dealing that goes on and all the rest of it. Very exciting.
Well, it actually directly was fodder for my current novel, although I don't want to forget the fact that you work hard and it doesn't fall in your lap, my career or anyone else's. But I just have to say, one aspect of my new novel I meant to tell you is that the main character, Miranda, she has a family history of political activism. Her grandfather was a union organizer. Her parents were leaders in the anti-Vietnam War movement in the 60s. Miranda feels, I have to live up to my family heritage. I want to do my part to change the world. And she feels frustrated. The great battles have been fought. What's left for her? But she is working for a think tank in Washington, D.C. And her big project is to get the federal government to, through Medicare, through programs, to cover the cost of prescription drugs, to help negotiate lower prices on prescription drugs, at least for senior citizens, if no one else. Mm-hmm. And at that, now, I wrote this, of course, just in the last couple of years, but this takes place in part in 2003. And in 2003, indeed, I was writing about that very topic, about there were bills, there were efforts to get the government to cover or negotiate the cost of drugs. Mm-hmm. People were taking buses up to Canada where they could get drugs cheaper. Much of that went in this book. The stories of the people I interviewed, I changed their names. The statistics, indeed, true fodder. And what really makes a person either laugh or grimace is indeed that became law. And want to know when it became law?
When?
About 3 months ago. This was happening in 2003.
Wow.
And it took nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
For you folks, in Britain, the UK, in Europe, of course, governments negotiate drug prices. Yeah. Anyway, mm-hmm. But indeed,
So I was just going to say that journalism. It's so interesting because even as an 8-year-old, you were writing about very topical issues, and here you are now with your first novel, still second novel. Sorry, still kind of, yes, I want to write about things that are affecting people in our lives, that impact families, individuals, that really do have long-term repercussions on day-to-day life. So do tell us about your novel, I Meant to Tell You. So it's about Miranda and this fight for having reasonably priced prescription.
Well, it's not, that's a subplot, the drugs, but it is about Miranda in a couple of ways. Yes, her struggle to find some cause that she desperately wants to be active in to live up to her family heritage. Beyond that, it's about secrets and friendships and immigration. And I will explain. It begins where Miranda is driving her friend Ronit to the airport so that Ronit can kidnap her own daughter and take her to Israel, where Ronit is from. And they don't realize this is considered kidnapping. So, that's just the prologue. I'm not giving away anything.
That's a big start. That's a good hook. Yeah,
I should stop there, right? Stop like that. But in fact, this act of friendship, right? Miranda, her friend asks, she does it. And I suppose you could say a mother's love for her child unscrolls into many, many repercussions. Miranda is engaged to be married to a very straight arrow U.S. attorney, the kind of government prosecutor, who shares her great visions of changing the world. He doesn't know about this arrest. This arrest for kidnapping alienates Miranda and Rooney. They lose touch. There are secrets that are unraveled as the plot progresses about all of them. Miranda, her fiance, Ronit, their families. Mm-hmm. So this one act, which is not a small act, but leads to, as I said, and the rolling of secrets that seem to have nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. And also draw in Miranda's desire for, to be a world changer.
Yeah. Oh, so friendship then and secrets, as you say, a big part of it. So what do you feel is sort of the main message behind it, or what do you feel these characters are sort of saying about friendship, about secrets through the novel? Is it a necessary part of life? Do friendships come and go? I'm always curious about what kind of led an author to choose the subject that they're writing about.
Oh, those are good questions. Thank you. Like my first novel had a more specific message, but this one, it's more of question messages like, okay, we all have to have secrets. There's probably not a single human being on this planet who knows every single thing about me. There's definitely not any human being who knows everything about me, and I assume the same is true of you. There are white lies, there are small secrets of omission, or lies of omission, lies of commission, how many is too many? What are okay ones? How do you balance? When do you become a person so caught up in your lies and secrets you don't know who you are anymore? And when do they catch up with you? So it's how do you learn as a normal human being to juggle the need for secrets and lies? And the same thing, it's related. How much should you do for someone you love, for a friend? Is it possible for a person to ask too much of you? Well, I think yes. So it's all part of sort of how you juggle. There is a secondary message. Okay. The book and Miranda assume that, yeah, you know what? We shouldn't just sit and eat and use up resources and have fun. And, we should also, leave the world a little better than we found it. I take this for granted. Your listener's definition of making the world better may well be different from mine, and I may think that they're making it worse. And that's fair enough. That's human life. As long as you mean well, I guess. Anyway, so I think that's a kind of secondary message.
I think it's a very topical message right now. I speak to a lot of new writers, particularly, who are very, very keen to incorporate some aspect, often of the environment, in their writing right now, because of course that's on everybody's mind. Lots of people are thinking about it. However they think about it, they are thinking about it. And so it feels very topical and relevant right now that one of the messages in your book is just to consider, are you leaving the world a better place or not? And how are we all, sounds like there's a question in there about, how are we all trying to make all of our lives a little better and give more, rather, as opposed to constantly taking, which has been the case, I think, for many, many decades now.
Yeah, well, I guess I hope you're right. I hope more people are thinking about it. And I think, having said that, a novel doesn't have to have a message. It doesn't have to be about climate change and the planet, which I suppose has that as one topic, has to be considered the most important issue in the world, because otherwise we have no planet to live on. And what difference does it make if we human beings have free speech or the right to vote or anything like that, right? So and that's an issue actually I hadn't looked at in a different book, in a nonfiction book I wrote, talked about juggling what cause. It's called The Overloaded Liberal, that book, and it's about how impossible it is to live according to every single one of your values. If you want to buy local, then you can't necessarily buy organic. I'm funny here, I'm pitching a different book of mine, but it just struck me that funny, I'm still on that soapbox in my fiction and my nonfiction.
I've read that from other, further authors who are further along and perhaps have a more public profile, that they have certainly found that for periods of their life, they're not writing the same story, but they're writing on the same theme. book after book after book, because it's still something that interests them. It's still what they're passionate about. And I certainly, my first 3 books, I'd say, were definitely all on the theme of motherhood and the pressures of motherhood and what's expected of us and how quite often we fail at it and we have to find a way through afterwards. But it's or we think we fail at it, we feel like we're failing at it, and then kind of coming through that. So if it's still subject that's you're passionate about, is trying to live life according to your values and live a life well lived, then it doesn't surprise me then that those are subjects you're inadvertently perhaps still writing about.
Okay, thanks. But I do want to make it clear, my opinion. Not every book does have to have a message. Not every book has to be about the most important issues facing the world. If you're writing a book that has a darn good plot that I want to keep going, that has characters I care about, either one of those is much more important than the great message. And sometimes the novels that are written with great messages are not such good novels,
Yeah, I think that every book does need to have a message, and not, as you say, not necessarily a big message. It can just be something that's about private life and the domestic life, but that the author does have to have something that they're trying to say about the world.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. As you say, your message of your books might be, being a mother is hard, and don't berate yourself if you are not perfect, or, hey, kids, being a mom is hard. So your mom is a person. Just think about this a minute. Right. Those are messages here. Mm-hmm. Those are themes, messages, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And you're right. Those are, and those are obviously some of the themes and messages, as it were, of my book, which are not the great world-changing ones, the ones about secrets.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes. Well, so thank you for telling us about it. It sounds very intriguing, especially the idea of all those secrets. But I know that one of the things you've said is that you've written with an unusual approach to third person voice, and so that point of view. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that. I'm intrigued.
No, thank you. I mean, I'm not going to say I invented this or I'm the only one, but I don't find very many authors who kind of go to the extreme that I do. So I start out by saying, and it's, I'm sorry, I instinctively do it. I can't write any other way. Okay, it's close third. Okay. So it's Miranda's eyes, for example. Well, I mean, there are 3 different narrators in the book, but in each case, it's that person's eyes. So say Miranda's eyes. All right. So I don't say Miranda looked around the room and she noticed that the curtain was falling off the window. That's not how I see things. Do you walk into a room and say, oh, I am noticing the curtain? No, you don't say that. You walk into a room and the curtain is falling off the window. So I get rid of all those intermediary verbs. I mean, when I'm going through my zillion, revision, and I notice any phrase like she thought, she felt, she understood, she saw, she remembered, wipe it out. I can't believe it still sneaked in, again. Okay. She has to have actions. She takes actions. She sits down. I mean, it's true. I don't think while I'm sitting down. Usually I don't think I'm sitting down. Sometimes I do, but, granted that, because you need to have some grounding. Mm-hmm. But although I might not even say that. For example, there's a scene where Miranda takes a deep breath and goes to visit her future mother-in-law. This is very fraught because her in-laws are very kind of rigid, perfect house, kind of wealthy people. They're very, and she senses they don't approve of her family. And so, she's very nervous. And okay, so it's something like I have to dig out the exact words, but it's like, begins, the shutters were perfectly aligned. The plants were starting to grow in perfect lines. I wouldn't repeat perfect. Mm-hmm. Something like Russ's mother opened the door immediately. and she was leaning against the door jamb, in her matched cardigan and slacks. Never once is the word Miranda in there, right? It's like, this is what, and then, Russ's mother led the way past the, perfectly painted hallway, and there was a picture askew, and into the living room, where she pointed to the matching chair, the chair that matched the sofa. Miranda crossed her legs, then she uncrossed them. So I don't tell you that Miranda sat in the chair, but the chair has been pointed to. I'm saying this terribly, and no one's going to want to read the book now because I wrote it much better. But I'm trying to dug out that page to read it out loud. So anyway, that's part of it.
So what appeals to you about that style of writing? Because to me, it feels one of the things I am drawn to is it feels very immediate. You're sort of almost, it's bringing the narrator right into the room and as close as possible to what's happening. What's attractive to you about it? What draws you to it?
Yeah, exactly. The honesty and immediacy. That you, as the reader, are right there, I hope, in my character's head, seeing through my character's eyes. And so hopefully you'll be much more engaged and involved. And I'm not wasting any words. And it can be hard to do. I mean, because when we read books, most books, Miranda noticed that. Miranda walked into, most books are written that way.
So for our listeners who might want to try this, then, take a scene from an existing piece that you've got and omit those verbs and just bring it really right close in and see how, and what I often find as well when I'm in revision is you discover how few words you actually need. Like, there can be a lot of flowery words and a lot of description that is almost, and we only know this when we come back to revision, that we realize, okay, it's slightly filler, that we're trying to work things out in our head as we're writing it out. And then when we come back to revision, then we sort of parse bits like that out. So our listeners, if they wanted to have a go at this for an exercise, first of all, grab Fran's book, have a look at it, read it, get a feel for that, and then have a go as well. So taking out those intermediary verbs, such as she saw, she heard, she sat, and then just get right to the heart of it, right to the meat of it.
That's perfect. I would have exactly. In fact, I have recommended that in blog posts. I couldn't resist it. Here, if you don't mind, I'm just going to start chapter 11. It doesn't matter that it's that far in. The shutters on the red brick row house spread straight out from each of the 8 windows like perfect rectangular wings, their white paint gleaming. At the edge of the sidewalk, 3 demurely trimmed shrubs bordered the cozy front yard's waist-high iron fence. According to the class schedule posted on the Georgetown University website, Professor Steinman would be safely out of the way, teaching for another 3 hours, blah, blah, blah. Abigail Steinman, however, should be home if her routine hadn't changed. As soon as Miranda pressed the button to the right of the polished wooden door, 3 bells chimed inside. The last chime tailed off. A moment later, the heavy door swung inward. Poised at the marble stoop. Okay, so I do have Miranda ring the bell. But other than that, like I said, the shutters are this, the shrubs are that. Professor shouldn't be there. The bell chimed, the door was open. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. I hate having books read to me because, you can't really follow them. But anyway, I'm hoping that sounded better than my attempt off the cuff.
No, and it's very clean. That's what I like about it too. It's very clean. Yeah.
Thanks. Anyway, your exercise is a great idea.
Thank you. So you've had this wonderfully varied writing career, and I think I sort of have a degree of envy. I think people who have come from non-fiction into fiction or move from fiction and incorporate non-fiction, you get the best of both worlds there. And I think that sort of cleanness of writing, from having spoken to other writers who have had a journalistic background, You learn to be very not economical with your words and deliberate with your words, choosing the right words. And I think that comes through in writing and shows really, really well. So thinking about all the things that you've done, the journalism you've done, the non-fiction you've written, and the fiction you've written, my goodness, what do you feel has been one of your biggest achievements so far in your writing life? Or maybe there's too many to
no. Well, okay, it has to be honest. Getting the first novel published, because that was my dream since I was a little girl. There's nothing.
And what did that do for you? Because this is something I try and explain to people who are struggling to understand why it's so important that they write this first novel and how changing it can be. What do you feel it's done for you?
Oh, I mean, it absolutely changed my life. It made me feel wonderful, of course. I mean, when I got that email from the publisher saying, we'd like to publish your novel, I ran up and down, back and forth the hallway of my house, shrieking. So it wiped away some of my self-doubts about myself. What have I done with my life? Oh, I have plenty left. But it took a huge, this is going to sound really weird, but it took a load off my shoulders. It was like, if I die tomorrow, and God knows I don't want to, but if I die tomorrow, in a way, it will be okay because I did this, It's like I said, this metaphysical load, and, it really, so I mean, having said that, I have many more goals I want to achieve.
But I think writing that first novel, publishing that first one, that's a real milestone, I think, in any author's life. And I sometimes, it's my job to explain this to new up and coming writers, to encourage them that this is so worthwhile. But sometimes I feel like I don't manage it. So it's always great to hear from other people, and just the visual of you running up and down your room, your hallway, having got that letter. And then I think absolutely what you said there about this load being lifted from your shoulders. Because for those of us who have been wanting to write since we were children, and we put it off and we put it off and we put it off, every time we go back to a new project, the weight feels heavier, the burden feels heavier, the guilt still not having written it feels heavier. But when you do publish that first one, or even just write the first draft of your first novel, it really does start to lift that weight, as you say. And there's a ripple effect, I think, that goes out as well into the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think you're right about the ripple, and you're right about that first draft. I mean, it's like, oh my God, I can get to the end. I actually can end up where I wanted to be. And I know when I finish my first draft, that it's going to need tons of revising, and it always does, I think you sort of, we were talking before we started recording about the hardest part and the easiest part. And I do think revising is easier than the first draft, except for one aspect, which I'll get to, because the first draft, you've got nothing in front of you, right? A blank screen. I think most writers agree it's so much easier to revise what's already written. Now, I think that the easiest part, let's say a typical novel for me, I don't know, 10 drafts. Some people will say, oh my God. And my newest one, I'm on the 17th. Yeah. I'm not kidding. But anyway, this one was a short one, like maybe 10 drafts. Anyway, so I'd say the easiest are the second, third, fourth draft, where you've got something basic, and this is not the last revision. It doesn't have to be perfect. The hardest is still the first draft, but the one that you think is going to be the one you send off to publisher or an agent, that's pretty terrifying too. You never know exactly. Well, I mean, you rarely know exactly. You may have an editor or an agent who said, I love your concept. Can you get it to me in a month? Otherwise, if they say, I love it, well, you've probably already written it before you pitched it. And so then it's kind of like, okay, you might have overnight to revise it.
Can I just ask you to just to explain that for those listening who might not understand that? So because most of us, we write the book first, then we revise it, and then we pitch it to an agent. But I I think in the non-fiction world particularly, and maybe if you're writing your second or third book, then an agent or the publisher might say, this is what we've got in mind. Can you write a book about this? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm sorry I jumped ahead. Okay, nonfiction. Okay, I can only speak from my experience. In nonfiction, I had an idea, I reached out to some agents, got an agent, wrote up a long, very detailed outline, plus a shorter summary, but even the short summary, I think it was like 20 pages or something, a sample chapter. And with that, right, I sold the book. And then I had deadlines, turn it in by X date. Then, then they would send it back to me for revisions, fiction. I think that once you're established, you can probably some people can just say, Stephen King or whatever, here's my title. Give me my few million and you'll get it when I finish it. But okay, for most of us, and certainly for your first novel, unless you're famous for another reason, put that aside, for your first novel, if you're a normal human being, you write the whole novel and you revise it and revise it till you think it's that one that I told you that's scary, that you're going to send off to either agents or to small presses that don't require agents. And you're probably not going to send the whole thing. Each one has his, her, their, its, criteria. But typically it'll be 1-page synopsis, 50 pages, of the novel. That's kind of typical thing. Maybe 10 pages. And you either might sometimes you meet these people at conferences, or sometimes you just send it cold, or sometimes you have a friend who recommends you. And then if you're lucky, they will say, oh, I like it. Please send more. Please send 100 pages. Please send the whole manuscript. By the way, even if they say send the whole manuscript, it does not mean they're going to take it on. So you have to have the whole thing finished. But you notice there's this delay factor. For example, you send it off to 5 agents and you're waiting to hear from them. And you go, oh, you know what? It's terrible. I'm going to revise it before I send it to others. Or you send it off and you're waiting to hear back. And then you decide to revise it. And then they ask for 50 more pages. So there is sometimes a time delay that allows for revisions. You might get feedback and, you don't jump and react to each feedback. But you know what? If you send it out to 10 places and they all have the same criticism, I think it's smart to look it over. And or you may have sent it out and then you went to took a writing class or went to a writing workshop and you got feedback. And so even though it's out to those 5 places, you're going to revise it for new ones to send to. If those 5 like it, I think that kind of happened to me, in fact, with my first novel. There was a small university press, Stephen F. Austin State University Press in Texas. And such an editor there said, she really liked it. And, please send the rest. I had already revised it somewhat, including the parts that she liked. And I said to her, I'm going to send you the entire manuscript. Some of the parts you read, I've revised. Do you want me to send it, with track changes or not? It was nothing major, I hadn't changed the whole plot. That's really unusual. I think that I shouldn't probably even be saying that. I'm going to confuse your listeners.
Well, no, it's interesting because, and it's great to know because we as first time authors querying for the first time, we think that there's this kind of formula. We're led to believe that there's this formula about it, but in actual fact, it's stories which are so nuanced being sent to agents who are human and very nuanced and have days that there are good days and bad days, and people will be human, and it's not set in stone how we do this. So understanding that there are different ways that this process work, I think, is beneficial to writers. Understanding that kind of more businessy side of it, that it's more than our spreadsheet of who we've submitted to on what date and have they replied and have they not. But it's not a machine, if you like.
Yeah. As you point out, right, the agents who read it have their bad days or have their good days. There's been all these studies done for job hunting or for trials. I don't want to misquote, but there are things like, if you're in trial, you want to get to a judge after lunch, I think they'll be in a better mood. Or I don't want to misquote, but all these things, right? Never do outreach on a Friday. Never. People want to go away for the weekend. They don't want anything new unless they have specifically said, contact me that day. Right. And best not to do it on a Monday, but certainly not Monday morning, all these. I mean, I think those things make sense as a general rule. I mean, think about your own life, right? You walk into your office or your home office. Don't talk to me before, 9:30 in the morning, because it's not that I've been sleeping. No, I've run 8.5 miles. I've checked all my emails. I've sent out the things I need to send. I've done my daily social media stuff. Finally, I showered. I have to get all that stuff out of the way before I can focus on the fun part.
Talking about that, do share with us, because one of the things that people are often interested in, and I confess I still am, is the day-to-day life of an author and how writers balance things, because when we're writing our first novel, we are invariably either working full-time, or we're full-time parents, we might be full-time carers, or doing a mix of all of those things. And we do tend to tell ourselves that we're too busy to do all these things. One of the things I do try to impart with my audience is that authors are busy too and have to write around the other things in their life. Very few people have that luxury. I suspect not even Stephen King has that luxury of being able to sit and write for 6 hours if they wanted to. But how does that work for you? Because you are busy, as you say, you do your running, you've got social media, you've got a social life, you volunteer, you're politically motivated still. So how do you kind of balance that, say, on an average day, and make sure that everything gets done, including your writing, whether that be fiction or whether that be nonfiction?
Yeah. Well, I know some people do have schedules. They write from 8 to 12 in the morning, whatever. We all have our own ways that work. That doesn't work for me, because each day has its own demands and its own rhythm. And what if I oversleep? Or what if it's raining and I can't go running? Or what other commitments, do I have? But and I'm the kind of person who cannot focus on the important things, the big things, until I've gotten the tiddlywinks out of the way. I mean, other people are, the advice they always used to give, because, I've been freelancing for 20 years. And so, you really have to learn to be self-motivated and set your own schedule. Mm-hmm. And they would always get the big stuff done while you have energy, and then do the little stuff. Well, that's not my system. So there is no typical day, except kind of what I sort of said. I am not human until I've run. So, and I have to run first thing, or I would never get to it, because, to pull yourself away from the emails and the demands that crowd on you. There's that. And then I do come in and try to clear out, there's emails that can be taken care of quickly and those that can't be, right? There's, I'm not that much on social media, but I do try to be a little bit alive on, every day on something or a couple of things. Goodreads, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, 2 of those at least, once or twice a day. So I try to, get some things in the morning. And then the chores, right? There's also those, whether it's a book review that I have, that would not be, book review is too big an example. But okay, just like with laundry or whatever, right? Stuff you gotta do. Then I kind of sit down and, but even so, right. Whatever, my homework for my classes I'm taking, I got to get that out of the way before I can really focus on the creative work, whether it's,
and is that because that means that you're because I'm one of those people that has to write first thing that's when I've got my energy. So for you, when it's the other way around, is that because mentally you can relax because, okay, I know I've done all those things and that's, or
Yeah,
do
I
you
mean, okay.
actually that is,
There are two exceptions to that. Okay, I have to. One is like while I'm running and I have my brilliant thoughts while I'm running, or the brilliant thoughts we all get in the shower, whatever. So those that's part of I have to sit down and incorporate them into my draft or make a note in my outline. Those, right, absolute priority. So those, but I don't consider that. Although, see, what happens is I might think it's a little thing I'm incorporating in the draft, and it becomes bigger and bigger, and suddenly it's 9:30 and I'm still in my running clothes, and I haven't showered. That does happen. And that's wonderful. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
That's part of the best parts of the writing process.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, at some point, 10, 11 o'clock, I am drained, and then I have to eat breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the energy to do whatever, the big stuff. Yeah. So when you say, we all need to eat during the day and revive our energy. So there is that part too. But I guess my early morning wake up energy goes to clearing the clutter.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. That's the feeling of decluttering, creating the space, both mentally and possibly physically as well, so that you can let that creativity roam wild as it needs to. So, and it just shows everybody works in their own way. And one of the other things that comes from writing a first draft of a first book is you get to learn what your process is and how you best write, which you're never going to find out unless you write the book. So it's a learning process about yourself as much as it is about the novel that you're writing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say that my process, in that sense, as a daily process, hasn't changed from nonfiction to fiction. When I was at a newspaper or magazine on staff, that was very different. You had 5 stories going at once, and you had your interviews scheduled, and it was very different. The process of drafting, of how I actually write the drafts, or outline the drafts or anything, is very different between nonfiction and fiction, because you're just starting differently. With nonfiction, you're starting with a pile of stats. It's just facts, interviews, statistics, research, to be organized into an outline and then written about, drawing from the data you already have, the sentences you already have. And with fiction, you start with your head, and the few ideas that have been floating around, the visions of what a character. Sometimes it's right, you have a vision of a character sitting in a chair, and sometimes you have a whole long scene laid out. So they are very different. The common factor is, I know I will fact check and research, and I know I will revise many, many times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I love hearing about how other people come to their desk, to the table, to the page. It works so differently for everybody. Fran, I'm conscious of time. We're nearly out of time, but I would love to know, what are you working on now, and where can listeners find out more about you?
Well, thank you for bringing us up. I am working on 2 more novels. I don't really like to get into details because, bad luck, right? Until they're in print. Until they're, in gallery. Anyway, I would say that my novels so far have been centered on a main character as a woman and her relationships with, whether it's her kids, her family, and her mother. Going both cases, it's her and her mother, and her father, husband or fiance, friends, and they're both secrets have been an important part. And they've been set in different places. All of these places are places I know pretty well. I Meant to Tell You is set a lot in Washington, D.C., and a lot in Brooklyn, New York in the 60s. So the next 2 are, again, focus on a woman. I don't know, I'm a middle-class woman, and her relationships, but they are different relationships than what the first 2 have been about.
Mhm.
And so less to do with partner, less to do with family history. Well, it's not true. One of them has family history. And they take place in different venues entirely. One is in California, where I lived for a long time. And one is in Albany, which is the capital of New York State.
Uh-huh.
Where can they find me, please?
Yeah.
My website is Hawthorne Writer. So HAWTHORNEWRITER. All one word. My last name, Hawthorne, and then the word writer. That's kind of my brand. So my website is hawthornewriter.com. On Twitter, I'm hashtag Hawthorne Writer. On Instagram, I'm hashtag Hawthorne Writer. So I mean, if you Google my name, you'll find me too. So those would be the best places. I do have a website, like I said, where you'll find a lot about my book. And it's on sale, all the normal places, IndieBound and Books A Million. I don't know quite what you have in Europe. I mean, yes, Amazon, of course, but I always encourage the independent, places.
Yeah,
So.
sure. Well, I'll be linking to your website, and people can go on Amazon, or they can go to Barnes and Noble and go to any of their local retailers, and they'll find it there. So that's wonderful. Fran, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all these nuggets of experience and knowledge that you have. I've really appreciated it.
Well, thank you. It's been so much fun talking to you.
If you're a first-time novelist who is struggling to either finish your novel or get those revisions to where you want them to be, then I've got just the thing for you. I have a small group coaching program which runs over 12 months, and over the course of that program I will help you fix those plot problems that you've been struggling with. I'll help you get under the surface of your characters so you really get to know them and what's driving them. And crucially for you, I give you that self-belief that you need to get you through the roller coaster that is writing a novel, so that you can carry on, get to the end, and get your book, your story out into the world so it can change people's lives. If that sounds good to you, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, I know I can help you get to where you want to be. So book a call with me. Let's have a chat and see if we are a good fit for each other. If you're interested in doing that, then go to emmadesi.com/story builder. I look forward to chatting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers. Hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.